Kemi was the girl everyone wanted to be, beautiful, rich, and always surrounded by friends. In her university, she is the dream girl of all the boys. She stood out. Her luxurious clothes, the sleek car she drove, and the way she never seemed to lack anything made her the envy of all. But what made her stand out even more was the mystery surrounding her. No one knew where it came from. She never spoke about her family, never revealed much about herself, and yet she never hesitated to spoil her friends with gifts or pay for extravagant outings. Kemi shared a room with two girls, Amaka and Chisholm, both close friends from secondary school. They had grown up together and entered the university at the same time. Amaka was the serious one, always cautious and thoughtful, while Chisholm was lively and easygoing. Though they were all in different departments, they shared a close bond, spending most of their evenings in their tiny room, laughing and chatting late into the night. But Kemi wasn't just close to her roommates. She had two other friends in her department of history, Sola and Coco. Sola was quiet but sharp, a girl who always knew how to stay in the good graces of people, using her intelligence to get what she wanted. Coco, on the other hand, was stunning. Everyone noticed her beauty, but she had a secret. Though she always smiled and pretended to be happy for Kemi, deep down, Coco wanted to be as famous and rich as her. She would do anything for that life, even if it meant sleeping with men or betraying her friends. One evening, Kemi returned from a trip to her village, unusually excited. "Girls, you won't believe this," she said, gathering her friends in their dorm room. "My dad is opening a new fueling station in our village, and he's throwing a massive party to celebrate. It's going to be huge. Politicians, influencers, celebrities, everyone important will be there." Chisholm and Amaka exchanged excited glances. This was the first time Kemi had ever mentioned her family, let alone invited them to meet her parents. "There's more," Kemi continued, her voice brimming with excitement. "My dad said he'll give any of my friends who come a huge sum of money, enough to, change your life." Amaka's heart fluttered with suspicion. Why now? Why the sudden invitation? "I'll have to ask my parents first," Amaka said cautiously. Kemi's face changed, if only for a second. "Oh, that's not necessary," she said quickly. "Besides, the invitation is only for 5 people. I've already planned it out." She laughed, brushing off Amaka's concerns. "Don't worry, Amaka, you'll be fine here. It's just a weekend. We'll be back before you know it. And I promise to bring something special for you." Chisholm felt a storm of emotions brewing inside her as Kemi casually brushed aside her concerns. She wasn't happy that Kemi had discharged her like that. The thought of leaving without informing her parents weighed heavily on her heart. But the joy radiating from Amaka made her sadness even more profound. Later that night, as they made their way back to the hostel, an uneasy feeling settled in Amaka's stomach. Chisholm, on the other hand, was buzzing with excitement. "Can you believe it? We're going to Kemi's village mansion," Chisholm exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. Amaka forced a smile, but anxiety gnawed at her insides. "Are you sure this is a good idea, Chisholm? What if your parents come to visit? Plus, how are you okay going to a place you don't even know?" Chisholm rolled her eyes. "You're being overly protective. I can make my own decisions, Amaka. You don't own me." Her voice rose, echoing off the walls of their dorm. The tension hung thick in the air as Amaka clenched her fists. "I just don't want anything to happen to you. You have to think about it." The argument escalated, words flying back and forth until they were both too hurt to continue. Chisholm stormed off to her side of the room, while Amaka sat on her bed, frustration simmering. The silence that followed felt heavier than any spoken word. Kemi, overhearing the argument from her corner of the room, approached Chisholm. "What's going on with?" Kemi asked, concern etched on her face. "I really just want to go to the party and have fun, but she's bringing my parents into the conversation, trying to scare me and acting like we are still kids. I get it. But they've been friends forever. Can't Amaka just trust her?" Kemi sighed, turned to Amaka. "You need to loosen up. You're now in your 2nd year. I sincerely feel you don't need your parents' approval for stuff like this. You only live once." Amaka frowned. The atmosphere grew tense again as Chisholm stormed to her wardrobe. "I'm going, Amaka, and you can't stop me!" She grabbed her suitcase and flung it onto her bed, her expression a mix of anger and determination. Amaka's voice trembled slightly. "Fine. Just know I care about you and I'll be worried sick." Chisholm's heart softened for a moment, but the weight of her excitement overshadowed it. I know, I'm sorry for yelling, I really want to go. Later that night, as Amaka was busy selecting clothes she will take with her for the journey, Chisholm wrote a note and slid it under her pillow. I love you. Call me when you get there. I'm sorry, my friend, it read. With that, Chisholm's heart ached, realizing their friendship was teetering on the edge. But the thrill of the upcoming adventure pushed her fears aside as she packed the last of her things. All the girls were happy and looking forward to the weekend. The night before they were set to leave, Coco found Sola in their shared dorm packing her things for the trip to Kemi's village. Sola's face was unusually calm, but Coco could sense the underlying excitement. Coco casually leaned against the door. Are you sure you want to go to this party, Sola? Sola stopped folding her clothes and looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly. Of course, why wouldn't I? Kemi's promising us a lot. It could be a game changer. Coco smirked. Or it could be a trap. You know how secretive she is. Do you really trust her? Her tone was light, but inside, Coco was hoping to plant a seed of doubt in Sola's mind. If Sola didn't go, Coco knew she'd have all the attention and the reward from Kemi's family to herself. Sola scoffed, tossing a pair of shoes into her bag. I don't need to trust her, I just need to be there when the opportunity comes. Besides, you're going too. Why? Afraid of missing out? Coco's stomach twisted. She had tried to convince herself she wasn't jealous of Kemi, but the truth always gnawed at her. This was her chance to outshine Kemi, to finally step into the spotlight. I just don't want you to regret it, that's all, Coco said carefully, testing the waters. We don't even know if Kemi's telling the truth. What if her dad's not as rich as she says? What if there's nothing for us when we get there? Sola's lips curled into a sly smile. I could ask you the same thing. You're worried, aren't you? Afraid I'll be the one who makes the right connections and not you. Coco stiffened, but Sola wasn't done. You've always been desperate to be like Kemi, to be the center of attention. I see how you look at her. You think this party is your golden ticket, don't you? Coco's heartbeat quickened. She was losing control of the conversation, and Sola was seeing right through her. Look, Coco said, trying to regain her footing. I just want us to be smart about this. We don't have to follow Kemi's lead all the time. You and I, maybe we could stick together, split the rewards between us, make sure we're looking out for each other. Sola's eyes sparkled with cunning amusement. Nice try, Coco. But you're not fooling me. You want to be Kemi, and I'm not standing in your way. I'm going, whether you like it or not. Coco clenched her jaw, her insides boiling with frustration. Fine. Just don't say I didn't warn you. In the morning, Amaka watched as Chisholm left with Kemi, Sola, and Coco for the village. Something in her gut told her this was wrong, very wrong. Amaka had her doubts, but when she was left behind, Coco, Chisholm, and Sola were too caught up in the excitement to notice. Kemi had painted a picture of a glamorous celebration, a chance to finally glimpse the life of wealth and power she had kept hidden from them all. As they drove deeper into the countryside, the excitement buzzed in the car. Coco admired the rolling hills and the thick forests lining the roads, imagining what her life could be if she made the right connections at this party. She glanced at Kemi, who sat quietly behind the wheel. Her eyes gleamed with an unreadable expression. But Coco brushed it off, thinking of how Kemi always played the mysterious one, the girl with secrets no one could crack. Finally, they arrived at Kemi's village, nestled deep in the woods. The house was grand, far bigger than any of them had expected. A sprawling mansion surrounded by towering trees that loomed over it like silent guardians. The girls gasped as they stepped out of the car. The air was thick with the earthy smell of the forest, and the house seemed to be the only building in the area, isolated and alone. Kemi, this place is beautiful, Chisholm exclaimed, her eyes wide. I didn't know your family was this rich, Sola added, looking impressed. Kemi smiled, but her eyes remained distant. We like to keep things private, she said softly. Welcome, welcome, he boomed, hugging Kemi tightly before turning to the others. You must be Chisholm, Sola, and Coco. I'm so happy Kemi has brought you here. The girls exchanged nervous glances, but his friendliness put them at ease. The mansion was immaculate, and despite the eerie isolation, they were impressed by the lavish surroundings. Coco, always seeking the high life, couldn't help but ask, "Where's Kemi's mom?" Chief Adderwale's face lit up with pride. Ah, she's abroad, my dear. But don't worry, she'll be flying in with the president's advisor tomorrow evening in time for the party. You'll meet her soon enough. The girls smiled, charmed by the idea of mingling with such influential people. Everything seemed perfect. Too perfect. You see, Kemi is my only daughter, Chief Adewale continued, his voice softening with affection. I love her more than anything in this world, and I've made sure she has everything she could ever want. That's why I asked her to bring you all here, to enjoy yourselves and relax before the big event. I want you to feel at home. They nodded, feeling more at ease. The man seemed genuine, almost too good to be true. As they walked inside, he motioned to the maids and a few men standing silently in the background. The girls noticed how immaculate the house was, not a single thing out of place. One thing, though, he added casually, I have one rule. No phones during your stay. The youth of today spend too much time buried in their screens and forget to enjoy the world around them. Coco frowned slightly. No phones. Chief Adewale laughed, waving his hand dismissively. Yes, no phones. I want you to disconnect and really experience the beauty of the village. You'll see. It'll be freeing. I've even had the service around here blocked so there's no distractions. Sola and Coco exchanged uneasy glances. Chisholm, on the other hand, looked less convinced but shrugged it off. After all, they were guests in a lavish home, and it was just a weekend, right? But as Chief Adewale spoke, Chisholm felt her phone buzz in her pocket. It was a call from Amaka. Without thinking, she excused herself from the conversation. I'll just take this quickly. She stepped outside, answering the call. Amaka, we've made it to Kemi's village. You wouldn't believe how beautiful it is here. But before she could continue, one of the men, who had been standing quietly in the corner, suddenly appeared next to her, his hand outstretched. Sorry, ma'am, he said, his voice firm yet polite. Chief's orders, no phones allowed. Chisholm blinked, her heart skipping a beat as she reluctantly handed over the phone. She barely had time to tell Amaka where they were before the man cut the call and walked away with her phone. As she rejoined the others inside, she noticed Coco and Sola handing their phones over to the maids as well. Her stomach twisted. Something didn't feel right, but she kept quiet, not wanting to spoil the mood. The staff took their bags, showing them to their rooms. The mansion was luxurious, with high ceilings, dark wooden floors, and grand furniture. Kemi's room in particular was enormous, decorated with fine art and expensive furniture. That evening, the girls sat down to a lavish dinner with Kemi's father. The food was incredible, more than they'd ever imagined. Kemi was quiet, but Chief Adewale was charming, telling them stories about his businesses and travels. By the end of the meal, they felt completely relaxed. Kemi's father stood up. Tomorrow we'll have the big celebration. Tonight, rest and enjoy the calm. The first night seemed normal enough. The girls chatted and giggled as they got ready for bed. But when they turned out the lights, a coldness seemed to settle over the house. Coco woke up in the middle of the night, shivering despite the thick blanket covering her. The room felt wrong, like there was something else there with them. She dismissed it as the strangeness of being in an unfamiliar place. The next morning, Kemi was nowhere to be found. She probably went to town to help with the party preparations, Chisholm said, not thinking much of it. But as the day went on, Kemi still didn't return. And when they asked Chief Adewale about her, his responses were vague. That evening, things began to feel off. The party was supposedly happening the next day, yet there was no sign of any guests arriving, no decorations, no staff preparing for a big event. When Coco asked one of the maids about it, the woman looked uncomfortable. Don't worry, everything is being handled, she said quickly, avoiding eye contact before hurrying away. Coco's unease grew, but Sola and Chisholm brushed it off. You're overthinking things, Sola said, lounging on a plush chair. Kemi's family is rich, they probably do things last minute, you'll see. But that night, the whispers began. It started with faint, distant murmurs. Coco, who was in her bed, woke up to the sound of someone whispering her name. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but then the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Coco! Coco! She sat up, her heart racing. The room was dark, save for the sliver of moonlight creeping through the curtains. Her eyes darted around, but there was no one there. She climbed out of bed, her pulse pounding in her ears. As she crept to the door, the whispers stopped. She flung it open and stepped into the hallway, empty, silent. Then she heard it again. Coco! It was coming from deeper in the house, from the basement. The next morning, Chisholm didn't show up for breakfast. Sola and Coco searched the house, but Chisholm was nowhere to be found. They knocked on Kemi's father's door, but he wasn't there either. When they finally found one of the maids, the woman wouldn't meet their eyes. "You should leave," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Something terrible is happening. You shouldn't have come." That was the moment Coco knew something was horribly wrong. They had to leave. By the time night fell, Kemi had returned, but she was different. There was no smile, no charm, just a cold, lifeless expression. She said nothing about where she had been, and when they tried to ask her about Chisholm, she ignored them. She just stared at them with empty eyes. Later that night, the horror truly began. The girls decided they had to leave immediately. But when they tried to leave, they found that the gates were locked, the house surrounded by thick, impenetrable woods. Desperate, they planned to escape on foot, but as they tried to sneak out into the forest, they heard footsteps behind them. Kemi's father was watching. That night, in the thick of the forest, the hunt began. Chief Attawale was no longer the kind man they had met. He was something darker, something ancient. Coco could feel it in the way he moved, the way the shadows seemed to bend around him. He was hunting them, and the forest was his trap. Sola was the first to go. As Sola and Coco stumbled through the dark forest, their breaths heavy and fear crawling up their spines, the terrifying truth began to sink in. No one was coming for them. They hadn't told anyone about the trip, not even their families. Kemi's lies had sealed their fate. Sola tripped over a root, her ankle twisting painfully as she hit the ground. "We're going to die here," she whispered, her voice cracking. Coco, barely holding it together, knelt beside her. "Don't say that. We'll figure something out. We have to." But even as she spoke, Coco's words felt empty. Deep down, she knew they were trapped in a nightmare far beyond anything they could have imagined. The forest was eerily quiet except for their labored breathing. The trees, looming like ancient sentinels, seemed to watch their every move. They had been running for what felt like hours, dodging the shadow of Kemi's father, the ritualist, who was stalking them with terrifying precision. They were alone, and no one knew they were here. But no matter how far they went, the forest seemed to twist and turn, leading them back to the house. Every time they thought they had escaped, they found themselves back at the edge of the mansion's clearing. Meanwhile, back at the university, Amaka paced back and forth in her dorm, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. It had been 2 days since she last heard from Chisholm, apart from the brief moment she had called on the first day. Her friend had promised to call and send pictures of the events, but there had been nothing. No calls, no messages. Now, Chisholm's parents were calling, asking if she knew why their daughter was not reachable. Amaka's heart pounded as she stared at her phone. She didn't want to worry them unnecessarily, so she told them a lie. "She is preparing for our upcoming test," so she turned off her phone and left it in the room so she could focus and not get distracted while she reads. "You know how serious she gets with her grades. I'm sure she'll call soon after the test." But as the third day passed with no word, Amaka's stomach churned with dread. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The guilt of lying to Chisholm's parents gnawed at her, and the silence was becoming unbearable. With fear gripping her heart, Amaka finally called Chisholm's parents, her voice shaking as she spoke. "I lied before," she confessed. "I haven't heard from Chisholm since she left for Kemi's village. Something's wrong. I think they might be in danger." Panic swept through the family. Without wasting time, they all rushed to the school's administration office, hoping to get more information about Kemi. They needed an address, a clue, anything that could help them find the girls. When they arrived, Amaka pleaded with the school staff. "Please, we need the home address of Kemi, the girl Chisholm went with. We can't reach her, and we're really worried." The administrator frowned, checking the records. She flipped through pages and scrolled through her computer, searching for any student named Kemi. After a few tense minutes, she looked up, her face pale. "There is no student by the name of Kemi in this university." Amaka's heart sank, her world spinning out of control. "What? That's impossible. She's been with us all year, attending classes, living on campus." The administrator shook her head. "I'm sorry, but according to our records, there's no Kemi enrolled here. If she's been posing as a student, she's not who you think she is." Chisholm's parents exchanged horrified glances, the gravity of the situation hitting them all at once. Kemi was not a student. She was a predator, using the guise of friendship to lure her prey. With this revelation, the families knew they had no time to waste. They went straight to the police, armed with the unsettling information. But the police faced a difficult challenge. Kemi didn't officially exist. There were no records, no ID, no family contacts, nothing that could help them track her down. She was a ghost, and hunting her felt like chasing shadows. However, there was one slim hope, the last call Chisholm had made to Amaka before they left. "It was short, but she called me," Amaka told the police, her voice trembling. Maybe you can trace it." The officers wasted no time. With the help of telecom data, they managed to trace the location of the call to a remote area on the outskirts of Kemi's supposed village. It was their first real lead. Following the lead from Chisholm's last call, the police mobilized quickly, heading toward the rural area deep in the countryside. As they approached the forest where the girls had been taken, the sense of dread thickened. The location matched the coordinates of Chisholm's final phone signal. The villagers were hesitant to talk about the place when the police arrived, whispering among themselves, their eyes full of fear. "That's Chief Attawale's land," one elderly man murmured. "Strange things happen there. People disappear." The police now knew they were dealing with something far darker than a missing person case. Hours later, in the dead of night, Coco and Sola were the only ones left, running for their lives through the dark forest. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, the terror of what had happened to Chisholm weighing them down like stones. Kemi's father was hunting them. His shadowy presence felt close behind. The forest was thick, twisting, and confusing. Every sound made them jump. Sola stumbled, falling to her knees as she gasped for air. I can't do this anymore." Coco, still panting heavily, stopped and glanced at her friend, eyes darting nervously between the trees. She could feel the darkness closing in around them. "Get up, Sola, we don't have time, we have to keep moving." But Sola didn't move. Her face twisted with desperation, and a look of cold calculation flickered in her eyes. "What if we make a deal?" "What?" Coco frowned, not understanding. "Look," Sola hissed, standing up slowly. "We can't both make it, you know that, but if I distract him, maybe you can get away." Coco froze. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized what Sola was suggesting. "You'd give yourself up?" Sola's lips quirked into a bitter smile. "No, I'm giving you up." Before Coco could react, Sola pushed her, hard. Coco stumbled backward, falling to the forest floor. Sola bolted in the opposite direction, leaving Coco sprawled on the ground, staring in disbelief. The betrayal cut deep, like a knife twisting in her chest. Just as Sola disappeared into the thick underbrush, a shadow loomed from the trees. Chief Attawale, silent as death, appeared in front of her, his cold eyes glowing in the moonlight. Sola's breath hitched. She barely had time to scream before his hand wrapped around her throat, lifting her effortlessly off the ground. Coco, frozen in shock and horror, watched from her hiding spot, her heart hammering in her chest. She saw the moment Sola's body went limp, her lifeless form tossed aside like a rag doll. In the chilling silence that followed, Coco crawled on her hands and knees, keeping to the shadows. Sola's betrayal had bought her a few moments, but the terror in her heart was suffocating. She had to escape. She had to survive. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the mud and leaves as she crawled through the forest, her body shaking with fear. She could feel Kemi's father nearby, his presence closing in. Chief Attawale's heavy footsteps echoing behind her. She was cornered, exhausted, and filled with despair. His eyes gleamed with madness as he raised a machete, ready to strike her down for the final ritual. Suddenly, sirens blared in the distance. The police had finally arrived, bursting through the thickets just in time. 2 officers tackled Chief Attawale to the ground, disarming him before he could harm Coco. Relief washed over her as she was pulled to safety, trembling and breathless. As Coco emerged from the forest, her clothes torn and muddy, the flashing lights of the police cars illuminated her path. The sounds of sirens filled her ears, but all she could hear was the echo of her friends' screams. As she looked up at the police officers surrounding her, a realization dawned. Trusting blindly in friendships, especially when fueled by jealousy or ambition, could lead to devastating consequences. In that moment of darkness, she understood that the pursuit of wealth and status could corrupt even the closest bonds. "Never again," she whispered to herself, wiping away her tears. "Never again will I let greed blind me or trust in the wrong people." At the police station, Chief Attawale sat calmly in the interrogation room, his face twisted in a strange grin, as if he was no longer afraid. The officers questioned him, pushing him to reveal why he had lured the girls to his estate and what had happened to Kemi. When they asked about his daughter, his grin faded, and a look of confusion flickered across his face. "Kemi, my daughter." He shook his head, chuckling to himself. "I don't have a daughter." The officers exchanged confused glances, pressing him for more. "Then who is Kemi?" Chief Attawale's expression darkened, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "Kemi is not. She's not human. She's one of them." "One of who?" "The spirits. Ancient, powerful spirits that disguise themselves as people. I've been using them for years to bring me what I need for my sacrifices. They know how to live among humans, blend in so perfectly that no one suspects a thing." He leaned forward, his eyes wide with fear and madness. "They choose people like you, people who crave what they don't have. Kemi is one of those spirits. She doesn't need money, fame, or friends. She uses those things to trap her prey." Coco, standing just outside the interrogation room, overheard every word, her blood running cold. The memories flooded back. The times Kemi flaunted her wealth, her mysterious absences, the way she always seemed to know exactly what to say to get what she wanted. All of it had been part of the trap. Kemi was never really one of them. She had been a spirit all along, sent to lead them to their doom. "What happens to the spirits after?" one of the officers asked cautiously. "They vanish," Chief Attawale whispered. "They find new prey. You'll never see Kemi again." The weight of his confession hung in the air, cold and heavy, as Chief Attawale stared at the officers with wide, maddened eyes. He began to laugh, softly at first, but the sound grew, a maniacal, uncontrollable cackle that sent chills down the spines of everyone in the room. "I shouldn't have said it. I shouldn't have told you," he muttered, his voice cracking. His body jerked violently, as if something unseen had taken hold of him. "The spirits! They know! They know I've broken the rule!" Suddenly, Chief Attawale bolted from his seat, knocking over a chair as he staggered toward the door. His laughter turned into a crazed scream, echoing through the halls of the police station. The officers tried to stop him, but he was too fast, slipping past them and rushing outside into the night. The cool air hit his face as he stumbled into the street, his laughter now a distorted wail. Just as he reached the middle of the road, headlights from an oncoming car blazed through the darkness. The screech of tires came too late. With a sickening thud, Chief Attawale's body crumpled beneath the impact, thrown several feet onto the asphalt. The police officers raced after him, but the damage was done. He lay motionless, his laughter silenced. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the wind. Then, as if on cue, the streetlights flickered. Just once, an eerie reminder of the spirits that lingered now without their master. Coco was never the same after that. She had survived, but at what cost? The nightmares never stopped. The whispers never left her. She knew deep down that Kemi was still out there waiting for the next ritual, waiting for the next victim. But the lesson was clear. They had trusted too easily, been lured by promises of wealth and excitement, and paid the price. Amaka, though guilt-ridden for lying to Chisholm's parents in the beginning and sad for failing to protect her friend, was ultimately the reason Kemi and her father were exposed. Her persistence had led the police to the truth. In the end, it wasn't just the darkness of the forest that haunted them, nor the looming terror of Chief Attawale's sinister rituals. It was the realization that the real monster had walked among them, disguised by their own desires, wealth, fame, and the allure of a life they envied. Kemi, or whatever she truly was, had been a reflection of their deepest, most dangerous longings. She had given them what they thought they wanted, only to strip away their humanity in the process. The surviving girls would never be the same. They had learned the hardest lesson of all. Some temptations are traps, dressed in luxury, waiting to devour those who reach too eagerly. Evil doesn't always wear a mask of horror. It often comes wrapped in everything you've ever wished for. Evil often hides behind a smile, and the most dangerous traps are the ones we willingly walk into. Choose your friends wisely. Sometimes the people you think you know were never really people at all. And remember, some doors are better left closed. Thank you for watching. Till next time.